Welcome to Food Chain, Country Canada's show about food, what you should know about what you eat. On today's show, the world's oceans are being fished out, but help is on the way in the form of a trawler gear research. Snacking, we all do it. Snacks are part of our daily diet, but are we doing the right thing? And it's on the grill. And another offering delicious enough to make you hold off on the snacks. All that and more on today's Food Chain. Today we're going to spend part of the show examining the fishery, a source of protein in danger of disappearing. In a few minutes, we'll look at a conservation effort undertaken in waters off Prince Edward Island. It's designed to help lobster stocks, but first a story on some interesting research going on in Newfoundland. The world's oceans are gradually being fished out. A large part of the problem is waste. Trawlers catch fish they didn't intend to catch and don't need. Here's Jonathan Crow with that story.
For decades, this has been the scene on the world's oceans. Huge floating factories mining the ocean for fish and profits. This is what it looks like underwater. The nets are enormous. They scrape the ocean floor clean. They scoop up the fish they're supposed to catch, but also other species. This is called bycatch, the fish that's wasted, thrown back over the side. This tank at the Marine Institute in St. John's is part of the key to reducing the waste in the fishery. This is where Glenn Blackwood and his team test and design new environmentally friendly fishing gear.
We've done a lot of work on the selectivity of the trawl, mostly trying to eliminate bycatch of juveniles.
How typical is this of the type of work that you're doing in the flume tank?
This is one of a large number of trawls. Actually, we have 110 different models constructed here, and work that ranges from midwater trawls in Alaska to shrimp trawls in Newfoundland and trawls for Icelandic companies. Basically, we do most of the trawl design that's being done for the Northwest Atlantic and elsewhere, like the Pacific.
How do you avoid catching species of fish that you don't want to catch?
That is probably the biggest single issue that we're working on. You can call it bycatch or species and size selectivity. If you want to catch a 24-inch pollock, or you want to catch shrimp that are 70 count, how do you do that without destroying redfish or turbot? Major challenges. Historically, I think, in terms of our fisheries years ago, there was always some wastage. There was always a bycatch of something. And worldwide, vessels have pulled up 100,000 pounds, picked out to 20 or 30,000 pounds of marketable, and discarded the rest. With full observer coverage now, these days are behind us, hopefully. And the challenge is to be able to go into the ocean and harvest what you can take out without destroying something else.
What are some of your success stories in terms of gear that does that?
We've been very successful, I think, in the shrimp fishery and longer toggle chain work that Phil Walsh did with Ben Foley up in Conch a few years ago. That raised the gear basically off the bottom, where the netting starts. The juvenile turbot pass under the trawl, and we still catch the same amount of shrimp. At the same time, we've been working on a crab mortality study, looking at the crab that are released back overboard, trying to minimize the mortality. We've had Dr. Scott Grant's been working on this with some of our other staff. And the mortality on crab that are discarded after being dropped 4 feet or more can be as high as 50%. That type of mortality I don't think is acceptable in terms of what crab is worth to the industry right now.
Crab and shrimp are, I suppose, the future of the fishery in this part of the world. How do you ensure that we don't make the same mistakes with those species that we made with cod?
Big challenges. Crab, we have a sexual dimorphism in the species, not to use that word, but females are very small. So we don't harvest, all the crab that we harvest are all male crab. And on carapace size, we measure them. In theory, all male crab get a chance to reproduce. There are problems with shrimp. Shrimp all start life as males. At around age 4 or 5, they convert to being females. The market pays more for larger shrimp. The other thing with shrimp is that we're fishing very small mesh gear. And it's caught by otter trawls. We need to minimize impacts on bottom. We need to optimize the size of shrimp we catch. And Errol Deluche and George Legge are working on a project now, a multi-level trawl, looking at where shrimp are found in the water column. And CCFI, Canadian Centre for Fisheries Innovation, is funding a number of projects on shrimp, trying to maximize the value, while minimizing the impact on the marine environment. Well, as I mentioned, when we were looking at the trawl in the flume tank, we have 110 models of trawls essentially from all over the world. A lot of it focused on the Newfoundland and Labrador fishery, and we built these trawls up over the past decade. Mr. Earl DeLuche is our senior model maker, and Earl's been involved in the construction of these along with Phil Walsh and George Legg, who've built these basically over a period of time for companies.
So Harold, who are some of your clients?
Here in Canada, mostly in the Atlantic region, we're looking at IMP, we're looking at North Sea, Linhof, Iceland. It's majority here in this area, but we have clients on the American East Coast and West Coast as well as companies in Iceland and Denmark that usually test there as well.
So what are you going to show us here today?
We're going to show you a shrimp trawl that's used here locally in our commercial shrimp fishery. This is what's used commercially in industry today. It's called a Nordmore grid. And the way this works is all the finfish shrimp that enter through the mouth of a trawl will come down and grow through the body of the trawl and will encounter this grid. All the large finfish cannot go through these openings. They're 22 millimeters in width. So all the finfish will exit through this opening. And we're after reducing the bycatch of finfish by about 95% because of this grid.
These are cod pots, and they've been developed. Philip Walsh, who works with us, has been working on this, been to Alaska, tried them in a number of Newfoundland fisheries, and has had some success. And have now modified these pots, and we'll be fishing them in Placentia Bay this fall.
So what's the idea here? What's your aim here? Well,
there's a lot of debate about, gill nets and otter trawls. We're looking at fixed gear as well as mobile gear. The tank is designed for mobile gear. A lot of our at-sea work is around fixed gear selectivity of pots. And the Alaskan fishery is based, a lot of it is caught in cod pots. And we've been looking at as an alternative for inshore fishermen, these pot fisheries. The fish are all alive. If there's undersized fish, they can be released. There's all kinds of benefits to fishing this gear. If it's stormy, you don't get out for a week, the fish swim around in the pot. And Phil's caught as many as 26 fish per pot in Placentia Bay. So we've now got to take this experimental net, a little bit more work on it, and try it on some sort of commercial scale. We're working with industry. We've tried this on commercial fishing vessels. And, stay tuned. It may be a year or two, but I think it's a viable option.
Glenn, thanks very much for the tour.
Thank you very much.
Now to PEI, where it was a terrible season for many lobster fishermen. Catches were down at some ports by thousands of pounds per fisherman. To make matters worse, fishermen had to throw back all female lobster of a certain size. Scientists were trying to prove that doing that this season will pay off down the road. Nancy Russell reports.
Until last season, this lobster would have been a fair catch. But this season, all female lobsters that fall into this size range must be thrown back. They're females between 2 and 3 pounds apiece. Charlie McGagan has been throwing back between 10 and 20 a day, and that adds up.
You're looking at $200 to $300 some days.
Lobster fishermen have always had to throw back any female lobster bearing eggs. But these window lobsters, as they're called, have to be thrown back with eggs or not. They're valuable for their track record as breeders. They can produce 10 to 12 times more eggs than smaller lobster.
They do produce a nice, healthy batch of eggs.
And so they're put back into the water to go off and produce those eggs. And the hope is to eventually increase the lobster stocks here in the Northumberland Strait. One of the challenges for lobster scientists is that it takes a lobster 7 years to go from an egg to maturity. So scientists need to find other ways to convince fishermen that throwing back these female lobster is going to make a difference. Charlie McGagan admits he was initially skeptical about throwing back the window-sized lobster.
Well, when it first came out, it seemed pretty ridiculous, really. I mean, they had no real science to back up what they were saying.
So now this provincial lobster biologist is tagging hundreds of female lobsters.
because the landings have been declining here in the central Northumberland Strait area, I think it's important to understand as much as we can about the lobster's life history, so we can maybe further assess why landings are decreasing.
40 fishermen, including Charlie McGagan, are also putting special bans on some female lobster, and they're keeping track of them in logbooks.
We had 18 windows that day.
Eventually, Robert McMillan will be able to estimate the lobster population in the strait and the difference throwing back the female lobsters could make down the road.
If we knew for sure that in, say, 5 years' time it was going to help everything, it'd be no problem.
As they add up their losses this season, fishermen will be looking to scientists for some brighter prospects in seasons to come. Nancy Russell, CBC News, off Point Prim, Prince Edward Island.
To the other end of the country now, in British Columbia's famous salmon run. It's not such a particularly breathtaking sight this year. That's because there are barely any fish to see. Only a fraction of the usual number of sockeye have reached their spawning grounds up the Fraser River. Chris Brown reports.
That's the seal. To chew the head up like that.
It is a buffet for seals this time of year on the Fraser River, but as bad as it looks, BC's sockeye salmon have even bigger problems. The water they live in is literally killing them by the millions.
It's nothing short of disaster, I'd have to say. We got reports at our meeting last week at Chilco that the spawning escapement is way, way less than what we expected. Probably 20 to 30% of what we expected.
The river water was simply too warm, up to 22 degrees Celsius, a lethal temperature for sockeye. These photos show the effects, sores and lesions, and fish so lethargic they have no energy to swim. Unfortunately, by the time scientists realized this, it was too late to stop the fishing season. The commercial fleet caught 2.2 million sockeye. First Nations took in another 900,000. Normally, that would leave 2.1 million sockeye, a healthy number for spawning. Instead, as few as 400,000 may survive. Predictably, the trouble with this year's sockeye run has ignited a new and very familiar round of finger-pointing. Some native groups are calling for an end to the commercial fishery, while others blame the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. A decade ago, the Fraser River sockeye run was the most bountiful and lucrative on the west coast, but in recent years, fishing opportunities have been curtailed as stocks shrank, in part because of ocean conditions, but also, environmentalists argue, overfishing.
Whether we have low fish returns because of temperature or climate change issues, or whether we have fish farms destroying runs where they're spreading disease and parasites, the department is not on the ground making timely decisions.
Not true, say Fisheries and Oceans officials. They say the problem is exclusively the weather, and that is totally unpredictable.
It's very difficult to plan for a once-in-a-100-year event. And that's what we faced this year.
As bad as things look, these losses may be a one-off event. Salmon run in 4-year cycles, so the impact may be limited to the 2008 run, when the offspring from this year would normally return to the Fraser. Still, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is under pressure to curtail all salmon fishing, just in case the warmer river waters are here to stay. Chris Brown, CBC News, Mission, BC.
Leaders in the Newfoundland seafood processing sector say their industry is at a critical juncture, and it's not merely a question of supplies of fish. There are about 9,000 fish plant workers, but many of them are scraping by on a combination of work and EI. That's making it difficult for fish plants to attract young workers. Chris O'Neill Yates has that story.
In coastal Newfoundland, there's nothing more dependable than the tides. But in the processing industry, the shifting tides are putting communities in jeopardy. There was a time when workers were plentiful, not anymore.
There's nothing to entice young people to come into the plant. When you go to work in the spring and the company tells you to expect 10 weeks work, and that's maybe all you're going to get, well, what's that for young people to work at?
The biggest reason for the shortage of fish plant workers is money. In Atlantic Canada, the average worker makes $15,000 a year. That's wages and employment insurance combined. Not much money for a young person starting out in life.
When you're starting off in man side of the body,
It wasn't enough for David O'Driscoll. He quit the fish plant for a job with the Coast Guard.
You didn't know when you were off. You didn't know if you were going to get enough for your unemployment, enough for your weeks. Plus, more money and a better job, right?
When cod collapsed, crab was the salvation, generating more actual dollars than cod ever did. But the numbers are deceiving. Fishermen make more money because of high crab prices, but plant workers earn less than they did before the cod moratorium. Many blame too many fish plants. The Fisheries Union is calling on Ottawa to put in place an early retirement program for older workers.
Well, we got people in our plant now that's been there for 36, 37 years.
Alan Moulton says if older workers could retire, that would open up jobs for younger people.
There is a need to address the problem. I'm not sure that companies have recognized at the individual level that they need to react to this like now.
Irene Plowman says this year her employer couldn't find enough workers, and it doesn't bode well for the future.
It's going to be a lot of empty plants. I don't know how they're going to get their work done. It's going to be big communities, retirement communities.
It's expected to be 3 to 5 years before the real crisis hits. But unless companies start making the fish plant an attractive place to work, young people, unlike the tide, will leave, never to come back. Chris O'Neill Yates, CBC News, Witless Bay.
The grocery aisle is full of them, snacks that promise great taste, but with none of the guilt. We're all familiar with the claims, low in sodium, low in sugar, and the biggest of all come-ons, less fat. But do they live up to their own billing? To find out, the team at Street Sense decided to check it out. Here's Darryl Kite and Allie Dixon.
We've been working our intern so hard, she's got hunger pains. Meet Allie. Allie and I are going shopping for some snacks, and we've got something to show you.
Right. You know those low-fat foods we buy, granola bars, light popcorn for guilt-free gorging? Well, some of them shouldn't be guilt-free, and some of them are no different than their counterparts.
Oh, intern, time for the shopping cart.
Claims like light, low-fat, all-natural are very attractive for health-conscious consumers.
It's about time. Push. Look at this Cashy Go Lean bar, for instance, full of protein and fiber, and right here in the health food section. It claims it may assist in maintaining a healthy body weight. Seems like a safe bet, a healthy yet satisfying snack.
But really, they're nothing more than glorified chocolate bars. If you look at the ingredients list, you'll see that after soy, the main ingredients are cookie pieces, starch, salt, and then more sugar. And they cost $2.49 for just one.
Okay, intern, onward to more shopping. Go, intern, go!
We also picked up some Quaker Harvest Crunch granola. The stuff we bought says it's light and crisp and made with 100% natural oats, wheat, and honey. The box also claims that there's 30% less fat than its counterpart. But when you check out the labels and the calorie counts, there's not much of a difference. The regular version has only 7 more calories per serving than the light version, and 1.7 grams more fat. But the regular version actually has more fiber, less sugar, and less salt than the light one. Street Sense talked to some dietitians, and they say granola is pretty fattening because of the oil and nuts added for flavor. They say you should stick to bran, raisin bran, or corn bran cereal instead.
And you should watch out for something else. Less fat doesn't necessarily mean low fat. A company is allowed to label its product low fat if there's 3 grams or less of fat per serving. Sometimes companies who don't meet this low fat law will try and grab your attention with comparative claims. What are you doing back there? I just can't put everything in. This isn't even from this section. They'll use a percentage comparison with one of their regular products, like the Quaker Harvest Crunch. They'll claim a product has less fat because they can't say it's low fat. Like these mint cream cookies from Snackwells. See, the package says 25% less fat. But if you look down here to the smaller print, it says 25% less fat than the leading branded cookie. Well, the leading branded cookies must be pretty fatty because these Snackwells have almost 6 grams of fat and 177 calories in 3 small cookies.
We also got these skinny sticks, veggie potato chips from the health food section. If you thought these were a healthy alternative to regular chips, think again. They're practically the same calorie and fat count as Humpty Dumpty bacon hickory sticks. And the Humpty sticks are a better deal.
Only $1.70 for a bigger bag. The skinny sticks cost $2.30, and you don't get as much. And low-fat snacks have to add more starch, sugar, and salt to imitate the taste of real fat.
A lot of the time, people blame fat for weight gain, but you should watch your calories too. And unsaturated fats can actually be good for you.
I don't do groceries. That's an intern's job. All right, let's go.
Oh.
I'll get the door.
Thanks.
Well, Canada isn't the only country struggling with unhealthy eating habits. The increased availability of fast food in China is creating new problems there. With a look at that story, here's Patrick Brown.
8-year-old Che Tianwei steers a shopping cart around a Beijing supermarket, keeping a close eye on the groceries his mother's choosing. What's really good to eat, he says? Candy. Back home, Li Ling cooks a meal of noodles and vegetables. She says she tries to make sure her son eats a balanced diet, but it's an uphill struggle. Even at home, it's hard to control what he eats, she says. The older he gets, the harder it is. He eats too much. In China today, there's an abundance and variety of food unimaginable only a few years ago. The meat ration used to be 250 grams per person per month. 250 grams per person, he says. Now you can buy whatever you like. For much of its long history, China's had difficulty in feeding its huge population. The worst famines of all came after the Communist Party took power. Tens of millions of people died during Mao Zedong's political campaigns of the 1950s and 60s, the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. 2 decades of economic reform have changed all that. Today in China, no one's dying of hunger. Instead, people are starting to die of heart disease and diabetes, just as they do in rich countries. Nutritionist Liang Lijing has recently returned to China after 16 years in the United States. The problems she sees here are very familiar ones.
China, they opened up, there are a lot of good things happening, but the food consumptive pattern, the eating, are definitely also, changing towards the Western type of style. And that definitely associated with a lot of health-related issues.
People eat out a lot more, and eat a lot more when they're out. Eating too much of the wrong kinds of food at a Chinese restaurant is just as unhealthy as it is in a Western one. But many Chinese are convinced that Western fast food chains bear the heaviest responsibility for obesity. Acupuncture needles are helping Du Shuang control her appetite. She wants to lose 10 more kilograms.
Fast food.
It's your foreign food that made me fat, she says. It's so good to eat. As the Che family and a young friend sit down to dinner at the local Pizza Hut, Che Tianwei's father worries about his son's diet. Yes, I do worry, he says, and I worry about fizzy drinks too. Some schools are banning them. I think they may be worse than this fast food. The boys say they do get some lessons on nutrition at school. In China, the teacher's advice is increasingly falling on deaf ears. Patrick Brown, CBC News, Beijing.
Coming up a little later in the show, a little something for the grown-ups. On the grill with lamb and lobster. They do make great French fries, though, McDonald's. We'd like to know what you think about anything you see here on Food Chain. There are several ways to reach us. Our email address is foodchain@cbc.ca. That's foodchain, all one word, at cbc.ca. Our toll-free number is 1-866-576-9595. You can also send us a letter here at Food Chain. Our address is Post Office Box 12010, St. John's, Newfoundland, A1B 3T8. Coming up next on Food Chain, it's On the Grill, and it's mouth-watering. Chef Byron Bursey cooks up wonders with lamb and lobster. That and more when we return. Time now for yet more snacking, adult snacking. It's our new segment, On the Grill. These were done a few years ago, so I look a little different, but I assure you, as always, the recipes are as delicious as ever. This is a nice way to arrive for a barbecue, isn't it? Here we are, we're at the Wilds Golf Course at Salmonier River, and with me is Chef Byron Bursey. He is the chef here at the Seasons restaurant at the Wilds, also the chef, by the way, at the Hungry Fisherman. But we're at the Wilds for our barbecue session tonight, an 18-hole golf course, and you know, I've been learning those golf skills on the program all week, so what better opportunity for me to try out what I've learned than here on the putting green at the Wilds before we barbecue. So Byron, could you hand me the club, please?
There you go, Karl. I've chosen this one. It's an 8-ounce ladle club, something I've designed.
Bruce Emery didn't show me how to use one of these clubs.
No, it was pretty unique.
An 8-ounce ladle club, you say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll have a go. Let's see. I think I've got a ball here. No, way it wasn't. You told me to hold the club. Like so.
Very good. That's good form.
Okay, thank you. I got it! The 8-ounce ladle club. This is the way to go, Byron.
Patent that one.
And you know what? If you don't want to use it for golf, you can always use it to carry your golf balls in.
Sure thing.
There you go.
Thank you.
Now let's do some barbecuing. Byron, this is the mother of all barbecues you've got here.
Yeah, this is a commercial barbecue, Karl. We can do between 25 and 30 steaks at a time on this one.
So, what's on the menu tonight?
Well, this evening, Karl, we're going to be serving some grilled rack of lamb.
Ooh, wow.
It's been marinated with some rosemary, some fresh thyme, some garlic, and some olive oil, a little bit of salt and pepper. We also have some roasted mussels, fresh mussels. We're going to use those as a garnish, basically.
So those mussels are just au naturel?
Au
You haven't done
naturel,
anything
yeah.
with them.
No, not at all. Just the natural flavor of the mussel and the smoke and that from the barbecue, yeah. And also we have a grilled lobster tail this evening. It's been brushed with some...
These are female lobsters, you can tell because they have the roe in
Yeah,
them.
the caviar is still there.
Yeah.
Nice presentation. And also I've brushed them with some clarified butter, some fresh dill, and a little bit of salt and pepper and garlic as well. So I'm just going to give those a turn there now.
Byron, there's something I have to ask you, which a lot of people have been asking me since we started this barbecue series. How do you keep things from sticking to the grill? Do you oil the grill or what?
No, not necessarily. The trick to keep things from sticking from anything, really, basically a frying pan or a grill or anything, is to make sure that the grill has been preheated nice and hot, and that way nothing will stick.
That's the secret. Just make sure you've got a good hot grill.
Yeah, it's as simple as that.
Or a good hot frying pan if you're frying something.
There you go.
It's the same
Exactly,
thing.
yeah. And also we have some vegetables here this evening. We have some red pepper, some red onion, some mushrooms, some green pepper. And I've marinated those overnight in a pesto sauce, which is basically pine nuts, garlic, and fresh basil and a little bit of olive oil.
Now, do you need to marinate vegetables overnight?
It's better to marinate vegetables a little longer than meat and stuff because it's more dense. It has a higher density than meat.
Well, Byron, this stuff looks about done to me, and I'm famished. Can we take it over to the table and do the taste test?
Not a problem, Karl. Let's do it.
Byron, this presentation looks great, I must say.
Thank you very much, Karl.
Well, I can't wait to taste it. I think I'm going to try a little bit of the lobster.
Sure.
I haven't had lobster this year, so I'd like to taste this. It's nice. Yeah, really, really good. And that lobster, the female lobster, I think is even sweeter than,
Yeah, it is.
than the male.
It's caviar, yeah.
We should point out, folks, that Byron not only prepares dishes like this here at the Wilds, but also hot dogs and hamburgers.
Yeah, no problem.
And all the recipes for tonight's menu and for all of the shows in our barbecue series are available on the beautiful new website that we've created for this series. And you can get that by... By the way, we'll soon have a link to those on the grill recipes on our food chain website. For more information about our show or any of the programs on the Country Canada channel, you can check out our website. The address is www.cbccountrycanada.ca. Also, this weekend on CBC Country Canada, you can catch Best Bites, some of the highlights of this week's programming here on Food Chain. There are several times to catch it. And that's it for this edition of Food Chain. I'm Karl Wells. See you soon.